Schefter podcast, an emergency edition of the Adam Schefter podcast, because when there is a seismic trade that is made in the National Football League, one of the biggest trades we've seen in recent years, it is time to put together an emergency podcast to break down and look back at the Micah Parsons situation. Now, last week, some 10 days ago, we said on this podcast that these two sides were headed for a divorce. The tape is there. You can listen to the audio. We said that it was not going in the direction that it should be. The two sides were not talking, that it looked like Micah Parsons would not be signing another contract with the Dallas Cowboys. And the reason we said that is because if we go back to late March and early April, the last time that Jerry Jones and Micah Parsons discussed a contract, Jerry Jones had a handshake agreement on a deal that he felt would pay Micah Parsons an average of $40.5 million a season. At the time, that deal would have made Micah Parsons the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. It was a mark that later in the summer, TJ Watt would exceed. But at the time, the $40.5 million deal a year was something that Jerry Jones felt that he and Micah Parsons had a handshake on. There was never any contract that was submitted to Micah Parsons, nor was a contract submitted to Micah Parsons' agent, David Mulgeta. But Jerry thought there was a deal. He referenced as much in the fact that when he bought the Dallas Cowboys for $150 million, he did it with a handshake agreement by looking in the eye of the man that he bought the Cowboys from and saying, "We have a deal." And Jerry thought that he and Micah had a deal. And he was so angry that they didn't have a deal that Micah Parsons in his mind went back on it, that there never were any subsequent contractual conversations again. That was the end. Now, the Cowboys said that they weren't willing to trade Jerry Jones. But a couple of weeks ago, somebody said to me, this issue bothers Jerry Jones so much, this is his Waterloo. He's not going to give in here. And he didn't give in. And it felt like the two sides weren't going to make it happen. We had Micah Parsons not practicing at training camp. We had Micah Parsons dropping a tweet, a post on social media in which he said that he wanted to be traded. When was the last time we had a public release from a Dallas Cowboys player saying he wanted to be traded? Now, back in the day, Michael Irvin might have wanted to be traded, Emmitt Smith might have wanted to be traded, but there wasn't social media the way that there is today, where Micah Parsons blasted out his news and called out the organization and said he no longer wanted to be with the team that he grew up watching and rooting for, that it was time to move on. I don't think the Dallas Cowboys particularly liked that very much. And again, zero contract discussions. There were people all around Dallas saying that Micah Parsons wasn't going anywhere. We heard it this week. We heard it on the day of the trade. But the fact of the matter is, this always was going to be a possibility. And I will tell you this, in addition to saying last week that we felt like these two sides were headed for a divorce, which now has become a reality, on Wednesday, I got a call that the Micah Parsons situation would be done and resolved in the next 2 days. Done and resolved. And I kept asking, what did that mean? How is that? Is that a new contract? I called down to Dallas, spoke to a few people, was told that there was no contract forthcoming. So here's where I was on Wednesday. I'm saying to myself, you're telling me that there's no deal that's forthcoming in Dallas, but this situation is going to be resolved in the next 2 days. That's what I was told. And then I spoke to Dan Graziano and Todd Archer, my fine ESPN colleagues, this morning. We wrote up a story about how the Cowboys appeared willing to listen to trade offers and that nothing was imminent, which was what we were told, but that it could come together quickly. That's exactly the story that we filed. And I'll tell you how quickly it came together. The Packers defensive tackle Kenny Clark, who was included in the trade along with 2 first-round draft picks, practiced with the Green Bay Packers on Thursday. And after practice, he found out he was being traded to Dallas. Now, why would Kenny Clark practice? Why would the Packers have him practice if they knew that he was going to be a part of that deal? But that's how quickly this deal came together. Again, I go back to what I was told on Wednesday. This deal is going to happen really quick. The Cowboys want resolution. Micah wants resolution. And Micah, on Wednesday, was in California with a back doctor getting a second opinion on his back. I don't think there was any way he was ever playing in the Thursday night opener against the Philadelphia Eagles. The Cowboys knew they had a problem. They weren't going to re-sign him. They weren't going to pay the man. Jerry thought he had a deal with them. They never went back to him. Micah was so angry that he wanted a trade. And then all of a sudden this week, after last week we said these two sides were on diametrically opposed sides, I was told it was going to happen quick. I have to say, I still didn't know that I was expecting a trade. It's still hard to believe. You hear that it's possible, but until it becomes a reality, you don't believe it. And lo and behold, the Dallas Cowboys made the unthinkable happen. Now I will say this, about an hour before the trade, got another call from somebody. And he said, bro, you better stay on this because it's happening. It's coming down. And I started texting a few people. It's coming down. The trade's happening. And they're like, we're waiting to see. And lo and behold, late Thursday afternoon, there was the trade. If we just follow the signs. This played out a lot like Khalil Mack in Las Vegas with the Raiders. The Raiders started the offseason and said, we're not trading him. We're not interested in trading him. It went on. He didn't show up to camp. He wouldn't return John Gruden's calls when he was the head coach. And lo and behold, on the Saturday of Labor Day weekend, the Raiders trade Khalil Mack to the Chicago Bears. And lo and behold, on the Thursday of Labor Day weekend, the Dallas Cowboys trade Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers. Fitting, because the only two players in NFL history who have ever had at least 12 sacks in each of their first 4 seasons were Reggie White and Micah Parsons. So there's some good company there. Now, I had some contact with the people in Green Bay over the last few days. They were a little uncertain about whether something would happen. And one of the people there said to me, you got me so excited that this could happen that I couldn't sleep and I couldn't think about anything else all day. Somebody said that to me this afternoon. I could just feel something like this coming. Again, until it happens, you don't believe that it will. But the signs were there all along. In Jerry's mind, there was a deal, and then there wasn't. And then there were no contract negotiations. And then there were harsh words exchanged. And then there was the situation where Micah asked for the trade. And then there was no sign that he was going to play anytime soon. And at some point, the Dallas Cowboys say, we're going to move on. And I also was told that there were multiple suitors during the day on Thursday morning. Somebody I spoke to said, this is a lot more real than you think. The exact quote was, this trade is more possible than people thought. It's more legitimate than people realize. Somebody said that to me on Thursday morning. And so while all the people were screaming no trade, Mike is not going anywhere, all the signs were telling you that he could and would. And essentially in the end, the Dallas Cowboys trade Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers for 2 first-round picks and defensive tackle Kenny Clark, who went through practice on Thursday with the Packers. And for the second time in months, the city of Dallas has shipped away one of the best young stars in the game. In February, the Dallas Mavericks traded Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers, and at the end of August, the Dallas Cowboys have traded Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers. Who ever would have thought in late August that Doncic would be a Laker and Parsons would be a Packer? But that's the world we now live in. The NFL is an incredible reality show. I wrote this down this morning when I said a trade was possible. I texted this to one of my friends. Let me get the exact quote here. Hold on one second. I want to read this, okay?